Hi.
Hi, Radic. Long
Hey,
time.
Hamel. Yeah, long time no see. Not even 24 hours, but I love this. So today with us we have Hamel Hussein, and he was a staff engineer at GitHub. He's a core contributor to FastAI. And to me, well, not to me, but he is a MLOps guru. So whenever I have a question, especially on MLOps, I just reach out to Hamel and he's super kind to explain those very often abstract and complex concepts in a way that I understand, and he doesn't make me feel stupid in the process, which just, he's very kind. And today he brings us another MLOps idea that can empower you, that can empower your team. So Hamel, what will we be talking about today?
Yeah. Okay. So I think today I'm going to tell you about the most important tool that I think
Ooh.
is there, and probably the most unexpected tool. And so I think we talk a lot about tools like, whatever, some tool to like automate your machine learning and some tool to serve models, another tool to, do CI/CD or something like that. And yeah, that's good. That's all nice. But what's like the most fundamental problem? And I think the most fundamental problem that uh, is involved in a lot of data science and machine learning is in organizations is like communication and sharing knowledge with each other.
Oh, yes.
Like you looked into something, like maybe you built a recommendation system. You probably looked at 100 different things. You went in like really deep into certain areas. You probably did a lot of analyses. When you're done, is that knowledge is kind of like completely lost? Or is there a way that you can sort of, you know, learn from each other? And like today, where does all this stuff go? It goes into Slack. And how do we feel about
Yes.
Slack? We hate Slack. There's nobody that that likes Slack. Nobody. Like,
Yes.
and there's a reason for that. The reason that
Hmm.
we all hate Slack is there is a general feeling that, I mean, it's not so much about the tool, but it's the process of in the tool of like, very short communications. You don't really have the opportunity to have long form, thoughtful communications. And it's not really, everything is just dumped there. It's a lot of noise. And there's not really like a curated set of knowledge that, you might want to search. And so, okay.
Yes.
So let me just share my screen real quick and tell you a little story.
Beautiful.
Um, so as you know, I used to work at Airbnb. And I think so Airbnb was like a very magical culture. Like something was very different about it.
Hmm.
Everybody like was constantly learning, very bright people. And there's a lot of different tools. And I would say the most magical tool, the tool that had the most impact was this project right here called the knowledge repo.
Wow.
And I'm not telling you that you should use the knowledge repo. I actually have an alternative that's like a
Hmm.
modern version of this that I'm going to talk about. But I just want to tell you the story of like why I feel this way. So the knowledge
Yes,
repo,
please. This is fascinating. I love learning about all this lore. What those exciting companies are doing, and to hear that Airbnb had a unique culture that allowed to solve them this problem. This is fascinating to me, and I believe to our listeners as well. So, yes, but please go ahead.
yeah. And so basically, the knowledge repo was kind of this like internal blog posting system that allow you to, um, not it's not just internal blog posts, but it was really built for data scientists and machine learning people because you could use your notebooks, you could use R, you could use Jupyter, so it worked for both.
Hmm.
And it allowed you to like publish your notebooks with your code as blog posts. And really, like what had happened is like when you did a project, there was a strong culture of, hey, if you don't write about it, it never existed, which is kind of like how the real world operates. Like if you do,
Yes.
as you know, if you do something, you never talk about it or you never write about it, then you might as well not do it. And
Yes.
it kind of takes this idea of like, hey, you should write. Writing is so important. And so basically they had this system where you have these, basically, you have a feed of different blog posts that people can write. This
Mhm.
is an example post. You can see it looks like a notebook. Well, you can see some of these things. This looks like this is a notebook. It's come from a notebook. And you could create posts. You could even create posts within the website itself if you wanted to.
So wait, this was company wide,
This was
or was
company
it
wide. Yeah, it was
wide?
company wide. And
Mhm.
so it was great because like you could create a report and then you could share it with like anybody. You could share it with non-technical people and say, hey, this is exactly what I found. And then this became a currency. Like the quality of your posts,
Ah,
the quality, the depth of your post became a very core currency that people had. And people were kind of, the people that had really good posts, you would know about that. And
I
like,
love this. I love this
yeah,
because, I hate these team dynamics where, it's about politics or whom you know or who you are friends with, and then it translates to sort of what happens to you in an organization. And here we have something where you can connect to the other person's thinking, thoughts, the clarity, the value, and this is something very much more objective than how somebody appears or what their interpersonal skills are. So as a person working in tech, I just love the sound of this.
yeah. And this is like a very fun place to go. I mean, you could browse posts and you could read a very long, like thoughtful post. There's no noise, by definition. People took a lot of care to write these posts and share their knowledge. And there was a tremendous amount of knowledge. You could search any subject and like, after many years, there was a big corpus of this knowledge. And it was fun, really. It was fun because also you could see the notebook, you could see the code, you could kind of understand like where they got the information, how to recreate it. And it would really, yeah, it's kind of also like you would learn about people a bit, be like, oh,
Mhm,
who is this? Like, who wrote this? It's
mhm.
like, and you would meet that person. It was a big company, and you would meet that person. And you would say, oh, wow, like that post you did, that was pretty good. I didn't think
And
about that. And
th-
it
th- th-
had
this,
this, yeah, yeah,
even on a personal level, like how do you grow as an engineer? And I feel that if you complete a project and then you write down your thoughts, this the learnings stay with you for longer. And also, there's this famous line that we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. So I think that if you have this forcing function that carries some incentive. You're doing something nice for your colleagues as well in the process, but something that uh, opens this space up for you to reflect on the project and your learnings. I think that's essentially accelerates the progression of your employees, that they learn faster because of writing down their thoughts. So yeah, I'm a big fan of
absolutely.
this idea.
Yeah. I mean, I love that. I mean, yeah, like when I wrote down, did basically wrote down like, a technical report or and like reflected upon something. Yeah, it really, it forced me also to make sure that I understood what I was talking about. And yeah, it was just a really great process. And it created a culture um,
Hmm.
that I feel like when you don't have some way to communicate with each other like this, you really, I mean, it's a really big, it's a big vacuum. I feel a big vacuum. Now, GitHub had in other ways. GitHub basically used GitHub issues to kind of try to approximate some of this, but it
Hmm.
would really never like kind of, yeah, it was never quite like this. And this was a magical, I would say, it was a tool, but then it was the process that it facilitated and the culture that it facilitated. I mean, you have to have a culture around like, okay, we celebrate creation of knowledge, and the
Yes.
sharing of knowledge in this way. And like, and it is easy to do that. I mean, once you create something like this, like it's good. Like it really helps. And I think, um, this type of thing is a critical tool. I mean, you can think there's all kinds of knowledge bases, like corporate knowledge bases, like there's Confluence and things like that, but those are not a good fit. Those are just, you can't upload a notebook there.
Yes.
And it is limited. And this kind of thing is focused on, people like us. It's made for people like us, and it fits our workflow. And so yeah, it was great. It was very successful. It's probably still being used. I mean, it looks like it's still being maintained. 9 hours ago, someone is merging a pull request. So I mean, you can tell, like, this company is still using that, and it's still valuable in that sense. And so, this really changed the game. I mean, I would say, just imagine going to work and you can learn so much every day because everybody's writing down their knowledge and their learnings. And it's not just like, it's stuff that you can take with you to your next job. It's like, even, people are writing tutorials on all kinds of stuff, like general tutorials, like new things that they're learning, whatever. They'll put it in here. You put presentations in here, put all kinds of stuff. Now, and so, okay, knowledge repo. So, okay, there is this knowledge repo. Now, as I mentioned, it was good because it kind of accommodated everybody, especially because it was both R and Python. So it didn't discriminate by like what kind of data scientist you are. It was very inclusive of everybody. It even had the ability, you could like, basically put a Word document in there if you wanted to. But so that brings me to this new site, Quarto.
Quarto.
So Quarto is the modern knowledge repo, and it's the knowledge repo, but supercharged to a completely different level. I would say it's not more complicated necessarily, but it's a lot, it's definitely a lot more extensible and a lot more powerful. And it is sort of the core product of, of Posit, which is formerly RStudio. It is this is like one of their flagship products, and it's free. They put a like great deal amount of love and care into it, and they continue to do so. And so, the way it works really is, it works in a very similar way. You can use notebooks, you can use Python sort of scripts, or kind of like that kind of look like R Markdown, but kind of are annotated in a special way. You can do R, Julia, observable notebooks, which are cool. And it's very customizable. So basically, here's an example of just using a notebook, and that notebook is turned into a web page. So essentially, very similar in that sense. And the thing that is really cool about it is you can do a lot of things with it. Like, it does not just a knowledge repo. You can, you can do whatever pages you want. You can have like blog posts on here. You can have something that looks like, so, in my personal site, I use it. So like
Hamel, just to get a high level understanding of what this is. So it starts with a Jupyter notebook, and then it allows you to output it in some form to be consumed by the reader. But at the core, there's always Jupyter Notebook, which is a familiar environment for us, something that we just, create a new notebook and are off to the races. Am I reading this? Okay.
Yeah, that's right. But what's really magical about Quarto, why is it you're like, okay, well, why is it better? It just has a lot more options, and it has many more features that are just magical. I mean, so, okay, the first kind of thing is there's a lot of these directives, this like pound, this, like, you see it says label here. I mean, we can, if I zoom in enough, you might see it. And these are kind of special comments that then do things. And you can do things like hide a cell even, or you can instruct it to execute a cell. And they have really good VS Code plugins. If you don't like the web interface of Jupyter Notebooks, they have an amazing VS Code plugin that worked really hard on it. That does that and gives you side-by-side preview as well, like instant preview on what you're working on. So it's really great. Another thing is you can target almost any format you want. So you can generate a web page, a PDF. It extends Pandoc. And so Pandoc,
That's
let me
really
just show.
powerful, right? The Pandoc
Yeah.
does everything.
Pandoc is like a universal converter for documents. Now, you see this thing at the right-hand side of the page. It looks like this graph that you can't even read. What this graph is showing you how you can convert from one format to the other. So you can go from, I mean, I don't even know what most of these formats mean. But like there's Word doc in here. There's, I can't even read it. I have to figure out how to like zoom into it properly. But, you can basically go from any format to any other format. So you can create slides from Notebook, Word doc from Notebook, or Markdown. You can go from Notebook to Markdown, Markdown to Notebook. You can do all kinds of, you can do whatever. And the thing that's really crazy is like, you can create books with this. So we have friends that are using Quarto to write books, O'Reilly books, because what happens is this allows you to generate any format. And, you can kind of get the idea, like we have kind of this flag, this to flag, and you just put the format and it just, will create a like PDF of your entire site. For example, that's like one way.
So this sounds very interesting because on one hand, it gives you this editing functionality. So, you're working on your Jupyter notebook, right? And then you can say, do this with this cell or do that with this cell. You can hide it. Okay, so that's quite cool. And then you can also use your Jupyter notebook as the basis of a lot of other documents, right? So it can be, from what I heard from you so far, it can be a blog post, it can be a book, those can be slides.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So this is how you make a PowerPoint slide. You just put format PPTX, and then you will get a PowerPoint slide. You can do Real.js slide if you like, that looks like this. You can do this in Markdown. It's really magical. You can make presentations like this. So you can do presentations. You can make all kinds of documents, like you can MS Word stuff if you want to, PDF. You can obviously create websites. There's all kinds of web themes and stuff like that. There's books, so you can create a book, and there's some books that have already been created. So, Wes McKinney has updated his Python for data analysis book. He wrote it with Quarto, entirely with Quarto, and so
that's something I'm personally interested in, because when I was writing my own book, I didn't like the experience of the tooling. There was nothing that felt familiar to me. So in the end, I wrote it in Vim using this modified version of Markdown. And then I generated the book using ASCII Doctor. But the fact that I can start with the Jupyter Notebook, which is an environment I'm happy about, if I could I would do all my work in Jupyter Notebook, and I'm doing 90% of it there already. So the fact that I can use this familiar environment to generate a book, that is really
so
appealing.
like this is a notebook here. We're looking at a Quarto site. This is Wes McKinney's book right here. We're looking at his website, and this website is generated directly from Quarto. This is a Quarto generated site. So Quarto generated the notebook, Quarto generated the website and the book. The PDF, like a PDF, you can generate a PDF of the book, but also generated ASCII doc so that O'Reilly, who publishes this book, because that's what they need in their documentation infrastructure, their printing press, they need ASCII doc, and so it generates that without any issue. So So yeah, it's really interesting. And yeah, he even says web version of his book was created with Quarto Publishing.
So he wrote it once, and he got a web page, a professional looking web page, because we have the navigation on the left, and also a book that is in a format that O'Reilly can deal with, or the format that they prefer. All right, that's
Yeah. And it's really powerful. So Quarto, you can put special content for different formats. You can say, hey, only show this cell if it's a PDF, or only show this cell if it's a web page, because you might want to do different things and put different variation of things or something like that. So it's very rich in that sense.
okay. So it seems like a powerful tool, but going back to the theme that we started discussing, how would you use it on a team to share knowledge?
Yes. So what you could do is, if you look here, or even, you could use it. So when we saw that page, the knowledge repo, it was basically a blog listing. And that's really what you see here already, is you can sort of have something like this, and you can search, and you can say, okay, you can search for your content. You can even have, you can do all kinds of things, and you can have categories, and you can search this way. You can style it however you want.
So what is this that we're looking at? This blog is generated from Jupyter Notebooks. So there are Jupyter Notebooks sitting in some directory
that's right. So these things are probably, like, this blog post is probably not a Jupyter Notebook. This is probably, because remember, you can write it in any format you want. So it's not a Jupyter Notebook, but it's something else. I mean, we can see what it is actually if you wanted to.
Wait a second. Yeah, I would love to see what this is, but from what I understood is the output can be anything. But now you're saying also that the input can be something else than a Jupyter Notebook?
Yes. So, I mean, it's kind of like the same mentality. Is like, your input can be anything and your output can be anything, because it's the magical translator. It's like science fiction, it's like aliens talking to each other. How are they doing this? Like, it doesn't matter. Somehow there's a magical computer in the middle that, like, is translating. It's like we're watching Star Trek or something. That's like what Pandoc is trying to do. Now, Pandoc, we're trying to use Pandoc by itself. It has a lot of bumps in it. Quarto smooths all those bumps out and makes them kind of work. Now, there's like 4 input formats that work. There's, Python, like Jupyter Notebooks, Markdown. You can do R Markdown, Julia, and Observable. So, I mean, that's a lot of input formats. And there's other, you can always use Pandoc to, like, go to do the conversion if you want to get something in here. So it is very interesting. So yeah. So if you wanted to see, like, how some of this looks, I mean, I could show you. So, like, as you know, NBDev is using Quarto. So let me actually, like, show you. So there's a blog site on NBDev. Okay. And
NBDev does a lot of things. So it's the way I understand NBDev, it's a framework for developing libraries, right?
Yeah, but don't worry about that. The docs are Quarto. So forget about, like, yeah, I mean, the thing that's driving the docs is Quarto. So, like, this specific thing here, this is a notebook on how to create a Gradio space. You could see it kind of looks like a notebook. I mean, because it is. And so the way we can see that, let me just open a tab here and view code. There's a blog folder and there's a post folder. So there's nothing NBDev really specific going on here, to be honest. And then there's this, I put the blog post here, and then, I have a note. Oh, so I guess I actually made it into a Markdown file because I felt like making a Markdown file for whatever reason.
How did you make it? Did you have to type it out yourself, or?
Yeah. I actually don't really know why I decided to create a markdown file. That's curious. I actually don't remember anymore. Um, I
So it
think
was not painful. It was not painful. If it was a painful experience, you would have, it would have stayed with you. So
yeah.
so
I think I may have done it in a notebook first and just exported it. I usually
yes.
don't do that. I'm surprised that it is probably there was like a reason for this.
Hmm.
It looks like this is also markdown, and this I bet you this is now markdown. Yeah,
Okay,
that's a markdown. Um,
but that blog post, that page, it looked very good, like professional, right? You had the
yes.
navigation menus on the right, a different navigation menu on the left. So to get to what we see on the screen here, uh, do you have to tweak the configuration of Quarto a lot? Is it involved, or how do you arrive
So
at
this is
this?
like a default. This is kind of a default configuration, and the way this particular blog is laid out, I'll show you.
Hmm.
You can see if you go to this index QMD. So you say you want to create a listing. A listing is just a list of blog posts. So that's what you see here, like these 3 rows here, because we only have 3 blog posts right now. And then you can say, okay, you want to create a listing. You want to sort it by these fields. The contents. There's a folder called posts. Like if you look in this blog folder, there's a folder called posts, and that's what that refers to. And
But
then
that's not nothing too scary. Not like you have modified some JavaScript
no,
files or
no. And
okay.
then while if you're doing this in VS Code, when you're typing it out, it'll let you know if you're doing something wrong immediately. It'll say, hey, like there is no field called, if you said content instead of contents, it would tell you this field doesn't exist
Hmm.
and stuff like that. And the best way to do this is kind of like other things that we've talked about, is like to actually go to sites and find them and kind of copy their configurations, to be honest.
Yes.
So like my site is actually very different. My site, you can see, I don't like those big graphical things because I'm trying to fit a lot of more information in my page. And so I just have like a very like a table with just the titles. I don't have the image preview or anything like that. And that is so I can, yeah, like we
So,
can look
uh,
at that if you want to, but I can show you, okay,
yeah,
how I
to be honest, I have been following your blog since a while, and I always found it to be probably the best or one of the best personal websites for a machine learning engineer. I even wanted to write about your blog because I thought that you were doing so many things right there when it was still on Fast Pages. I think you used Fast Pages before, right? But the point is, how do you come up with content for your website? What is the reasoning? Why do you post certain things there? I think that that would be very interesting to me
hmm.
and to others. What are the criteria that you use?
You mean like how do I fill the page with stuff? Like so if I go to like my site
Yeah,
haml.dev, like what is going on here? So
exactly.
yeah, so okay,
What
like
is going through your
yeah.
mind? Mhm.
Yeah, so okay, what's going through my mind is um so I do consulting to, in my spare time to help bootstrap the stuff I'm hacking on. And so that is the most important part of this page. I want to somehow create an impression, maybe, and let people know that they can get in touch with me, or how to get in touch with me, or what to do. And then just kind of share, like, kind of give people an idea of what I'm interested in. And so that's why I try to keep this short. I say, okay, like, you're not going to, maybe you want to know who I am, try to be somewhat succinct about that. And then, how to get in touch with me. And then I have blog posts. I mean, I don't want it to be so long that, I just want to see a table of it. And like, if you want to like read something, you can, like, why, like this thing about Kubernetes that we already talked about. Okay, like that's one thing. Um, and then, just give like a kind of have like open source projects I've worked on, because I feel like that's a big part of my background, is like all the open source projects that I've done. And then I had this from my other like old website, like list of talks that may or may not be important. This thing is interesting. Notes. So there's this concept of like TILs. Like, so Simon Willison is kind of an inspiration here. Um, he has, if I go to his website, oh, that's the wrong Simon Willison. Let's see. So like he has something called TILs, which is basically a bunch of notes that he makes.
Huh.
And it's really, I mean, he has so many notes, it's like unbelievable.
Mhm.
And so this like rubbed off on me. I thought, okay, like this is kind of useful, like just writing stuff down. It really is for myself, but it's
Mhm.
public just in case. And so that's what I have here is like, my own notes. I haven't really been filling it out for that long. I only started maybe like 3 or 4 months ago. So like, I really filled it out like for Kubernetes.
Wow.
There's a lot of notes here because I was, refreshing my knowledge on Kubernetes because I was doing some projects that involved Kubernetes. And then lately I've been doing this ML serving. So I have some, a lot of notes that I've taken here. Not as many as Kubernetes, but, I think as far as I wanted to go with ML serving, I kind of, just dip my toes in the water of like refreshing my knowledge there. But anyways, like put my notes there. Um, so
So
yeah, I mean that's kind of what it
to
is
de
right now.
to deconstruct a little bit what you're doing, it seems that at first you have this very succinct intro to who you are. So when somebody goes to your web page, and we obviously start reading the web page from the top, they have your picture, so that you already become a bit more relatable. And then there's this very brief outline of who you are. And the rest of the blog, it really goes back to the idea that you mentioned earlier. If you don't write about it, did it really happen? So to me, it feels that through your blog posts, you're obviously doing something awesome because you're sharing your knowledge and experience with the world. But also when somebody goes to your website, you're building your authority or your brand, right? You're showing, hey, this is what I have done, this is what I can do. And then I also love the idea of those TILs. I completely didn't realize that this was a thing, but you're sharing something, you become discoverable because this is indexed by Google as well, and you're learning in the process. And learning on your own is a very sad experience, right? I feel that
Yeah,
when I put something out there, because learning is lonely. It takes hours. It takes
yeah,
hours of deep focus.
yeah,
You cannot be disturbed. And here you're saying, hey, that there's actually something that I'm sharing with others. So
yeah.
yeah,
And
I love
sometimes I
it.
put notes out there and people tell me I'm wrong about something or miss something, which is helpful. Like I did that
Yes.
with something recently, and some people commented like, "Hey, maybe did you think about this thing or that thing?" I said, "No, I didn't think about that." Um, and
And
so
just putting
yeah,
stuff in writing, you can see when your ideas don't work.
yeah,
If you write something out, that's already one level of improving your thinking or your understanding. But the second level, what you mean, yes, or what you mentioned, to get the feedback, and sometimes you will get feedback from people who are extremely knowledgeable in a certain thing, right?
yes,
Like
yeah,
superstars, essentially.
yeah,
And that's extremely valuable.
yeah. I think it's valuable. And so like, Quarta helps you solve problems. Like, for example, these blogs, like a lot of these blogs don't exist on this page. There are other pages. There are other websites. Like, this one is on the GitHub blog. And,
Mm.
like one down here is probably on Medium, for example, that's on Medium. And so that's the one problem I had is like, I blogged on other things, but how do I collect it here? So like, Quarto is very flexible. I just say, okay, my contents exist in this YAML, these like two YAML files, or not these
Mhm.
two YAML files. Like, so what this means is this contents field says, okay, I want you to create a listing, merge
Mhm.
all the blog posts on my blog that are on this blog with a list of blog posts that I like list in this blogs.yaml. So if I go to, here and I go to blog data, I have a list of blog posts I've written elsewhere. And then if I go to the blog folder, these are actually blogs. I've only written one blog on here. So that gets merged automatically. And it just
Mhm.
becomes one table.
Beautiful.
So yeah, it's
So if someone would like to start with that, and I think every developer, every data science person should have their own personal website for the reasons that we discussed. Also, it's super useful in the job market. You know, if you're talking about a new role and you can send somebody a list of the things that you've written, I feel, in my experience, this is a hack I use so many times, and it sets the conversation up in a completely different way. So for somebody to get started, what would be your advice?
Yeah, my advice is go to the docs. There's a nice get started page. You can follow the steps. It's a gentle introduction. It allows you to like do whatever you want, you know, in basically any IDE you want. And then you can go to the guide and start reading stuff that interests you after you're done with that. And that's where I would start. And that's all you have to do. And then after you're done with that, I think one thing that is underrated is, so actually two things that you should be aware of. One is, look, like this site itself is obviously built in Quarto. And you might see things that you might want to recreate, like, oh, how did they put these icons and these buttons here? Or,
Yes.
how is this, like, how did they put this file name here? Or I don't know, like, how did they make this note call out thing? How did that happen? And what you can do is you can click on edit this page, and you should look at the source code. You should see how they did that. And you can learn, that's how you learn like a lot. Like that's the easy way to do a lot of things, and look at other people's sites. It's really useful if you go to the Quarto site, they have a gallery, and then you can go and like just check out other people's Quarto sites. There's a lot of them. You'll recognize MBDev here, and some other things here. This is my site on here, but basically, you'll see a lot of sites, and you can just check them out, and you can look at their source code. And I would say don't forget to look at the source code. That's like easy to forget. And I think actually the source code, because the Quarto docs itself implement all the features that are possible, then you'll end up like learning, like, okay, how does that work? Like, how's this, like, oh, that's interesting. Well, how's this filter here? Like, there's this table and there's a filter just for this table. Like, that's really cool. Like, how do they do that? And you can say, okay, you can look at this particular page. So there's not an edit page necessarily on every single. If you click this GitHub link, it'll take you to the Quarto CLI. But what you want to do is go to the Quarto web. And then in there you want to look for the file, because the Quarto CLI is actually the tool that you're using. Quarto web is like that website. So we look at Quarto web. And so that's just scratching the surface. There's all kinds of like really cool things you can do if you're really into like extending Quarto. There's this really interesting, I'll just show you one thing.
Yes, please.
So there's this thing called notebook filters. Okay. And what you can do is, so you can think of Quarto like a document processing pipeline. And what you can do is you can mutate notebooks before they're rendered in any way that you want using code. So like this is a simple example. You have to make that utility read from standard in and emit to standard out, basically. So this thing just says, this is a simple program that just places a comment above every cell. Like this comment just places above every cell. That's all it does. You can do more complicated things, like you can like have your own special comments, and like when those comments are detected, you can do something. You can put Radix picture on there. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
And
or
so like
an email sign up form. That's always a problem that needs to be solved for every blog post. Like I want to, to give the person a way of learning of my new project. So I do this. I share this via my newsletter. But how do I add the field to all the things that I've written? Or when something changes, how do I update it? So this would be the solution right here.
Yeah, that can be a possible solution, is like, okay, this filter occurs before it reaches Quarto, but there's also, there's also an entire pipeline Trying to, I don't know why my browser is frozen. Looks like I'm having a problem getting to the page, maybe. I can't load the page anymore. Looks like we broke it. There we go. So basically, like, okay, so the way it works, we don't have to get into this, but essentially you have these things called filters generally, and there's a pipeline. Quarto's in the middle by default. And if you put these filters in, you can have any arbitrary program that reads and writes the standard out, and that mutates there's a format called it. So these documents are all represented by an AST, just like Python has an AST, and then you can mutate that AST if you want.
So you mutate it on the fly.
But,
you don't mutate the notebook. It's immutable in the sense you start with the notebook, but then the contents, they can go through this very elaborate pipeline to do crazy things that you might want.
You can mutate it before it gets to Quarto. You can mutate it after. This is like something that's mutating before it goes to Quarto. Like maybe spell check Lua is gonna stop if it, I don't know, detects a spelling problem. And then this is something else that happens after Quarto. But a lot of times you don't need to do this. No, Quarto has a lot of built-in stuff. Like almost anything you want to do, you can do it like natively in Quarto. And there's also a lot of like community extensions where you don't have to, like build them yourself. So there is, if you go here to the Quarto thing, there's extension. There's an extension one thing. Let's see.
So the ecosystem is already quite mature. There are a lot of people contributing to.
Yeah, I'm trying to find an extension that that is interesting.
I even saw Quartovim.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. Let's see what this is.
Cool.
Okay, anyways, we don't have to get too deeply into that. I mean, I actually don't know where it went. I have to like go search for it, but there's like in there, you can find it in the documentation. Actually, if you look at extensions, then, you can probably find, extensions somehow.
I love all this, that there is a way to make this arbitrarily elaborate, and to to also rely on the community and some of the things that they produced in the form of the extensions. But I think what resonated with me really strongly is how you showed how we can get started and essentially copy good ideas from blog posts, from even from Quarto documentation, because this is how we learn. This is a great hack. Instead of reading through the entire documentation, instead of reading through the code, and not everyone has the willingness, the time, or the ability to do this, but because all this is exposed and you can jump directly into what produces an outcome that you're after, I think that's just fabulous for people from various backgrounds with various levels of experience with web development, with blogging. Personally, I love that idea, among many other ideas that you shared today with me. I really appreciate it. Any finishing thoughts that
no, that's it. I think you should try Quarto. I think the main reason to do it is this knowledge sharing. I think it's the most underrated tool, and you should check it out.
Knowledge sharing is not discussed very much in our world, in machine learning, or I don't know why. I remember when I worked in IT support, this was a big thing, knowledge sharing. Every team had to have this figured out, because otherwise, you were not doing it right. And in development, it's, just go read the code, whatever, there are 50,000 lines of code, and some of the code was written 5 years ago by a guy who, who was not native to the programming language that is used, but just go read the code. So I think knowledge sharing is a much better answer to this dilemma, and the way that we can uplift our teams, ourselves, and the field as a whole. Hamel, thank you so much, my friend.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. See you soon.
All right. Thanks.